Hey, welcome to another episode of the Golden Moment podcast with me, Mr. Mijo Biscan. Today's podcast got an amazing guest by the name of Mijo Dyson. She's a singer-songwriter, a blues artist. She's had eight releases over the years, 6 of those full studio albums and 2 EPs. Mijo first came onto my radar through a friend who was saying, hey, you got to check out this songwriter. She lives in Torquay, or grew up in Torquay, near where I grew up in Geelong. And they were like, you got to check out this album. And I was like, okay, sure, fine. And then that album was called The Moment, and it's an incredible album. So I've listened to it many times over. Sometimes I do a cover of that song, The Moment. And I've seen Mijo now perform a number of times. She's an awesome human being. She's a great songwriter. And in this conversation, she really reveals a lot about her process as a songwriter. So for me, it was a real joy. It's the first podcast where I get to talk directly with another songwriter and kind of talk shop. And so I learned a lot from Mijo. A couple of other highlights in Mijo's career. She's performed with some amazing people. She's performed with Frank Zappa's band, the Mothers Of Invention. She's supported Stevie Nicks, Chris Isaak, Eric Clapton, Franco. She's played with some of Australia's other top female artists, Deborah Conway, Kate Miller-Heidke, Ella Hooper. And she's appeared on Australian hip-hop artist Earth Boy's second album, The Signal. So she's done a lot, she knows a lot, and in this conversation she's very generous in sharing a lot. So I hope you enjoy it. So here's my conversation with Mijo Dyson. Well, I'm here with Mijo Dyson, singer-songwriter. How are you going, Mijo?
I'm good. I'm doing well today. Thank you. How are you?
Excellent. I also just remembered my mum calls me Mijo. Well, she says, my parents are Croatian, so my mum calls me Mijo all the time.
Oh, I love it.
Kind of my nickname. So,
I love that.
Yeah.
It's a good name.
It is a good name. It's a great name. So you're obviously a singer-songwriter. You're now based in LA, which we might get to talking about as well. But do you want to tell us a little bit about kind of your songwriting journey and just your journey as a musician, where it started and how you got to LA?
Yeah, thank you. Well, I grew up with both parents being big music fans and buying a lot of records and playing me, a wide range of music, a lot of American music. So, blues from the South and soul and gospel, and then like your Bob Dylans and Leonard Cohens. And, my dad is a guitar maker and player, and, he's a big guitar head. So he'd play me like Robert Johnson and Albert King and, John Lee Hooker and all these, and Ross Hannaford, an incredible Australian guitarist who I'm a big fan of. Around 14, a friend of mine got my dad to make her a guitar, and I was super jealous because I'd never thought of that, even though it was just in my house. So I got my dad to make me a guitar, and I just fell in love with guitar playing because the first thing I discovered is I could just learn all these songs that I loved and sing them. And that was a miracle. But then this same friend started writing songs. And, that hadn't even occurred to me. You could just make up shit. You could make up stuff. And it's since that moment when I realized that one could do that, and I tried it. I mean, it was terrible for years, but it was still a miracle to me. You could take something from nothing, or you could create something from nothing. And not that it's nothing. I sometimes, I guess back then I looked at it like that. Now it's more like I feel like there's an element of channeling something. So I'm not really creating it, but I'm available to kind of bring it out into the world. But still a miracle, either way you look at it, just that something can be discovered. And so I fell in love with songwriting. I started, wrote so many awful songs, and it wasn't until, so that was about 15 I started writing, and then it wasn't until I was about 21 that I had enough songs that I actually liked that I wanted to make a record. And I did that. and I've been making records ever since. I think 6 records and an EP, something like that. And because of having grown up, almost exclusively on American music, like for good or bad, like I didn't get exposed to a lot of Australian music until later. And so I just had this fascination with the US, these, musical meccas like Muscle Shoals and in Alabama and Memphis, Tennessee, and Detroit, and all these scenes, all these incredible genres that exploded out of the US and influenced the whole world. So I wanted to go and see it and be in it. And I moved over after my 3rd record, first to Boston, to the East Coast, to just kind of be where all the dense touring is at. And then, through no real like direction of my own, I ended up in LA and fell in love with it. And I'm back in Australia like a lot, so I kind of have two homes. But LA is weirdly suitable to a Victorian, I think, with the sort of dry heat, and because I used to go camping in the desert and stuff in Victoria, so I'm like used to that, and even into Central Australia. So that desert feel is very, I don't know, it appeals to me a lot. And then, culturally, the incredible kind of, coming together of people from all over the world to pursue their dreams, and particularly in the arts. I mean, in all things, but there's such a encouragement to artistry here that was really important to me, because I think I spent the first big section of my career being very, that classic Australian sort of like, keep your head down, don't aim big, don't aim too big. Yeah. So that's I don't know if I went too long or too short on that, but that's kind of a bit of a potted history.
Perfect. I love it. There's some great stuff in there that I'd love to go deeper into.
Yeah.
But before I do, I'd love to just get into talking about songwriting, because even as you're talking about it, it's making me realize I very rarely talk about songwriting. So, and maybe it's the same for you, or maybe you have a gaggle of songwriters that you talk with this stuff about. But it's such a solitary pursuit, and most of the time you're just eking it out. You're just like, you turn a corner, you're like, I found this thing, and that's exciting because it's a discovery. But hearing you talk about it makes me go, that's like the experience that I have, and so it's quite exciting. So when you're talking about the I suppose your philosophy of songwriting, this idea that you can turn nothing into something, it is such a miraculous thing when you encounter that you discover it. I remember the first time I sort of thought about that was I thought, I can create things. Like and this is, you got to be careful not to get into a God complex, but I'm a creator of sorts. I can take something from nothing and turn it into something. It's quite a powerful realization. Do you remember when that first kind of occurred to you? Was it very early on, like when you saw your friend do it, or?
I think it was definitely when I saw my friend do it. I was blown away. But I think it was so that was about 15. But I think around 19, I wrote a song that actually felt like it conveyed something that I was trying to get at. All the other songs had felt like I'd fallen short of, what was actually in here to find. And then, that moment I remember quite strongly feeling, the power and miracle of that was really special. And I think, hooked me. I mean, and I've been doing it for 20 years. Like that's over 20 years. That's amazing, and with mixed success in terms of the outer world. So, I love, I guess I've reached a stage where I'm not doing it for an outer world success. Although I think it is important to, when I'm writing, to be thinking about not to make something that so that I think people will like it, but to have the idea that I will try and give, put it out into the world. Not that it's just for my own little lunchbox, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, that's also like an interesting thing to navigate when you're writing, whether you stay completely in the space of I'm just expressing this thing, I don't know what it is, and I'll see where it goes. And then knowing at some point, if you want to be a career musician, it has to interface with the world. So there's this part of you that's like, yeah, but I don't know, are people going to be able to dance to this at that festival, or people are going to be able to connect to this, and it is an important consideration as well. So you mentioned also before we got started that, you have been doing this a while and you have figured some stuff out, or you feel like you've figured some stuff out. And you mentioned like the idea of, getting into a certain state or getting into a certain mood or setting up your environment in a particular way. Are there certain things that you feel like they help you pretty consistently to be able to get in and write?
Yeah, well, I'm going to answer this slightly different to what you're asking, but like to set it up, the way that I thought that I needed to write when I was younger. Well, one thing I've always known that might be different than some songwriters, or is that I just need to show up on a pretty consistent daily basis in order to write. I can't wait for that perfect day when all the inspiration is there, or that just doesn't happen. Like I've tried it. I've tried going like, I'm not gonna write. I'm just gonna see what happens.
Yeah.
And nothing happens.
Yes.
Like I mean, I'm always also listening out, whether it's in books I'm reading or podcasts I'm listening to or poetry I'm reading, for like inspiration and things that I might jot down or whatever. But aside from that, if I don't sit down and give it dedicated time, I will not write songs. And, I'm jealous of it. Maybe it's a myth, but the idea of the songwriter who just like, oh my God, I've got to get this song out. And they just, they don't even have control, they just have to write when the inspiration hits. That's not me. And so early on, I used to make myself write for 2 hours. That was like 2 hours a day was my thing. And, right. Except that like it was such a kind of, I had such a Nazi in my head going like, you must write for 2 hours, that what would happen was I would often, not even try because I couldn't imagine being able to do 2 hours. Does that make sense? Like, so setting a goal so high that I couldn't reach it. And so I would, I would reward myself if I managed to get the 2 hours done. But, a lot of times I just fall short and collapse in like a depressed heap in my 20s,
Yeah.
And so over the years, I've slowly cut back my, like, this is how much I'm dedicating when I plan my day. And I've cut it all the way back to half an hour as like the minimum that I will do. And I am so much more productive than if I try and do, like you probably can tell, like I love a schedule. I love a to-do list. Like I need that in my life. And it sounds anathema to songwriting because it's like, oh, it's creative and it's just free. But that's what works for me. And the other thing is too, I used to just beat myself up. Like if I couldn't get past a stuck spot in a song, instead of just moving on to something else, like I would just stay there. Stay there or give up, and now I'll have like 3 or 4 songs on the go and I will just cycle through them. If I kind of, get stuck on one, just move on to the next. Don't labor this, like focus on this stuckedness that may just come unstuck by itself by the next day or the next day. And that generally is what I found. So now that's part of being more, more, I don't want to say more productive. There's more ease with my songwriting. Like I'm probably still writing the same number of songs over the course of a year as I used to, but I enjoy it a lot more. And I think I mean, I know it's such a subjective thing, but I much prefer, I think I'm such a better songwriter than I used to be, you know, and care about more elements than I used to, you know, like when I was first starting, it was always like the sounds of words and the music, the sort of style and guitar was sort of paramount, and then lyrics were kind of a little bit secondary. And I feel like now, you know, it feels like every element is kind of paramount.
Yeah, cool. The thing about structure is worth exploring more, because I find the same thing, and I run workshops on like creativity with people, and like a big part of my discovery with songwriting was also structure. Like if I didn't have structure, the time just slips through your fingers. I don't sit down to write. My mind's not really even focused on writing, so I'm not picking up on inspiration around me or whatever. And so it's something that I've always found really difficult to convince artists of, and not to just say, okay, you've got to like plan every minute of your day, but that structure is very supportive to the creative process.
I'll come and lecture on that if you want.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Well, here's your opportunity.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, maybe, is that something you discovered over time as well, that structure was actually really important and that you embraced, or do you think it was also part of your personality already?
It seems like it was already there, you know, given that I remember when I was, you know, at the earliest memories of songwriting, it was like I had to do, well, once I was doing it full time, I mean, so from about 21, was like I have to write 2 hours a day. I had this, but the piece that was missing was the flexibility of like, you know, in fact, my husband, Carl, who I write with now, and we can get into that because that's a whole nother thing. I mean, being a solo songwriter for like 15 years and then joining forces with him is a whole different thing. But like his philosophy of like, just show up for 3 minutes and, you know, and there's a good chance that it'll turn into more.
Yeah.
No, versus you have to show up for 2 hours and, you know, the mind rebels. It's like, I don't want to do that. That sounds awful. You know? So, I love that kind of approach where it's not about task mastering. It's really about giving some gentle space to oneself for that creative process to come through. And yeah, I like pray to the muse now too. Like I'm not ashamed to say, like I, that was never part of my life for years either. But I love actually, you know, invoking some idea of being willing and open, and wanting the songwriting and, you know, the eventual song and hopefully it goes out into the world to be something that contributes something valuable, you know, something that touches people for the good, you know. So kind of praying for the muse for that before I start.
Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. So even that's an interesting thing. Like, well, another thing you have sort of talked about, that the thing of, you know, the internal world of songwriting, but then there's the external world of music. And over time it's become less about, I don't know, needing it to be a specific thing externally, but you sort of bought into the idea that, oh no, I'm a creative person. This is something that's just so important for me to do. And I suppose, like calling on the muse or whatever to help you. So what I'm getting at is this idea that over time it can start, songwriting can start as a thing, you know, like you want fame and fortune and stardom and all of that stuff. And then slowly, as you were mentioning there, it becomes about a contribution, or it becomes about something you can offer or value you can pour into the world. Maybe tell us a little bit more about that transition for you and what that means, like what you see as your role as an artist, as a songwriter?
Yeah. Well, I definitely see that both ambitions were alive in me at 15, to be definitely wanted to be famous for songwriting, was a bit more ambivalent about being famous as a face and a person.
Yeah.
But but also wanted my songs to be, to touch people in the way that songs had touched me. The way that I just, have been struck throughout my life by how someone I don't know across the world could speak such powerful words or meaning or mood to me. And yeah, I think I just have slowly gotten more and more in touch with the idea of, with that idea being paramount to the fame and fortune idea, which I have come to see is quite empty and potentially a damaging force in the world. As much as, like, not to deny whatsoever that I would want recognition and money, like making good money from songwriting and all of those good things, or potentially good things, and to be critically acclaimed and to have my work loved by people, but so much more powerful on the level of it touching them than it being something that they just think is cool. Like when I meet people who've where a song has affected them in some way that is profound, it's sort of there's nothing else like that. That's quite extraordinary. And in some ways I can't even get my head around that. Like, coming back to the idea of being a channel, like I like that idea because it takes my ego out of it somewhat, and I can just go, like, honestly, I can go, I don't know where that song came from. Like I was there sitting on the couch with the guitar and it appeared, like, I mean, there's little bits that I can remember, like, oh yeah, but so much of it just seems like an utter mystery as to where it comes from. Melodies especially, I mean, lyrics too, but melodies, like, they just plop out, for want of a better term.
I love the word plop. I'm so happy you did.
I don't know why that came to me.
Plop.
Yeah, plop out. Yeah, it's an onomatopoeia, isn't it? Is that the right term for it?
Oh, yeah.
Like it sounds like it. I don't know if I answered your question even. I got kind of carried away, but
yeah, that's good. Yeah, we're just talking about that transition of making it more about purpose or like contribution, that it actually has so much more value than when you first start doing it. You just think, oh, I want to write a song and I want to express myself and I want whatever, I want it to be cool and I want people to come to my shows or whatever, to realizing, like, oh, I'm doing something that's far more profound than even I realized. It's connecting with people and expressing a truth or a perspective, even whether it's true or not, but just your perspective and how that's a contribution.
Totally.
I was going to ask you about things that get in the way of songwriting, because you're sort of talking about dropping into that space of being connected to the muse or being a channel and just being very open and removing the ego, I suppose, and creating space to sit down and be available for it, I suppose. And there's this great Picasso quote where he says, inspiration happens, but it has to find you working. And I really love that, like that thing of just showing up and being present and available for it.
Yep.
And so what are some of the things that you've noted, get in the way, whether it's, like you mentioned, that 2-hour block, like I've got to do this 2-hour block. And then if you don't do it, you feel like a failure and you're never going to be able to amount to anything. But what are some of the things that get in the way? And then what are some of the things that help you?
Yeah, well, certainly it's my own thinking that gets in the way most of the time. So, thinking that because I haven't actually written a line or actually come up with something new, I'm not making progress, and that means it's all a failure. And that kind of cycle of spiral of like, oh well, why bother, and blah 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 blah. And the thing I've had to learn over and over again is that I can have written some little riff 4 months ago and thought, oh, that's stupid, and then and been working on little bits and pieces for weeks at a time without an actual song happening, and just think it's all wasted time. And then something that I didn't pay that much attention to will somehow either come back to me, or I'll be going through my voice memos and find something, and suddenly boom, like a few things that I'd been working on all come together, and none of that time was wasted. And I just learning to trust that when I sit down and give it that time, that it's never wasted. And to just trust that there's some value in these little either riffs or lines or voice memos. And I obsessively record little voice memos. And then that miraculous thing happens. And of course I want that miraculous thing to happen all the time. But for me, it's like, it might be 3 weeks of kind of plowing along to have like a breakthrough that opens up into a song. And then it's really fun when, like, if I've got a few songs that are, that breakthroughs happen. So the song is definitely on its way, but then I've just got to keep write the second verse, write the, is there going to be a bridge? That's really now an enjoyable process. So the hardest part is still the sort of, okay, I've got a blank slate. I want to write a song, but I've got nothing. And then like plowing along with, this riff, oh no, for a long time before, that breakthrough sometimes happens. And so getting caught up with my own judging my own process can get in the way. I always try and write in the morning before I do any other, like, don't look at phones or emails or anything like that. Have that. And I've basically learnt my lesson, so many times that if I don't write in the morning, I won't write. It's just not going to happen. So if I hear the voice that says, oh no, like, let's just do this first and we'll write this afternoon. Don't believe it. Don't believe that voice. And because it's tricked me like 1,000 times. Yeah.
It's so slick.
Yep. And like, as much as I don't want to have the attitude of that younger person who was like 2 hours, right, for 2 hours, I do want to have the attitude that, like, I try to show up even if I don't feel like it, a gentle cajoling of myself that it, and I'm always amazed at how, like, on a day I didn't want to, I can be like, just hate, like, just really, like, even just half an hour, just finding it so excruciating to sit there.
Yeah.
But 29 minutes in, oh shit, because even just one line to me is precious. Like, even if it's or just one little, like, shift in the melody that makes a verse just, like, sing much more than it was, is like, that was worth the half hour. Yeah. Being depressed, I used to get depressed a lot in my 20s, and I'm not some people write well when they're depressed, and I just don't write at all when I'm depressed. So I've done a lot of things to not be depressed, and so generally speaking, I'm not. It's much more rare for me to get depressed, but that's an impediment for sure. I can't bring myself to show up for it. When I feel like that. Yeah. So I try to, meditate. I mean, I meditate and do a lot of things to keep my little brain happy.
Yeah. I think that's such an important part as well. Like, looking after yourself is it's also, like, I've become really big on habits, like the thing you're talking about. Like, I have a daily practice that, like, it's just so important for me to follow it, and not to beat myself up into it, but just knowing that when I show up for it and I do all the right things in the morning, like I have a really like honed morning routine. Yeah. And if I do it, it just brings out my best. But if I'm set up, my mind's in the right place, I'm really clear on what I'm doing that day, like priorities and, like songwriting. Okay, that's happening at this time. And then showing up for it. And like you're saying, even when I don't feel like it. And like you're saying, that's where so much of the gold happens. And it also has taught me that I actually can trust myself, that if I do show up, something is likely to happen,
Yes.
Even if I sit there for the first 3-5 minutes, whatever, staring at the wall, my brain will get so bored. It'll just say, why don't we just work on that song? Or let's do this. Like I just kind of try and starve my brain of distractions, and then it will just start playing and go, well, we could just finish that song. Let's just finish the song.
And if I'm absolutely desperate, like I cannot face even trying to write a riff or a line, I'll learn someone else's song. Like I'll learn a song that I love to understand how they wrote it and what that, because you know how listening to a song is so different than when you actually learn how to play it. Someone else's song. And suddenly it's like, ooh, like maybe you'd find like a chord change that they use that I could steal. Like just, that's another thing that I do. Yeah.
Right. Cool.
I know you're about to ask a question.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Yeah. Yeah. That's another great access point, I suppose. You just need to find as many doorways in, like,
yes,
how
totally.
how can I get myself just into that place?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I was going to ask about that. Yeah. That relationship, like the gentle cajoling or because there's essentially, there's the inner critic and that nasty part of you that's like, don't show up, nothing's going to happen, you're no good at this, why are you even doing this? That's like the big question. Why are you even doing this?
Yeah, exactly.
Why are you doing this? Yeah, what's the point of this?
Yeah.
And then there's another part of you that can be supportive and can be like a pushing or motivating force. I don't know if pushing is the right word, but the thing that does get you over the line. And that's normally a slightly different voice, I suppose, is how I think about it. It kind of knows what's good for you and has your best interests at heart. It's kind of like going, no, let's just try just a couple of minutes, or you'll feel better afterwards. It's kind of like having this like a best buddy give you a pep talk or something. So do you find you've been developing that voice more, like just this confidence that's like, no, let's get in and do it. I know you don't feel like it, but, and also another part of this question is the importance of doing stuff when you don't feel like it. Is that something that's important to you, or?
Yes. Yeah. Like it's strengthening that muscle that I feel like is such an important muscle in life to have. For me, like a big one has been, I mean, it's boring to even talk about, but exercise, like such a struggle. For a variety of reasons, I was ill and injured as a kid a lot and had a lot of time off school, and it, set me up to have this idea of myself as kind of weak physically. And it's taken me like such a long time to get the confidence and trust that I actually can do it. I can do it. And it's taken exercising that muscle of like showing up even when I didn't, and I mostly don't feel like it, mostly don't feel like it. And absolutely that voice. I mean, I think, such a big thing about meditation is noticing the thoughts that we have and being able to decide which ones we listen to and which ones we go. I mean, and this is a big part too, like instead of going like fighting those thoughts, it's like going off, okay, they're trying to help as well. They're trying to protect me in some way, but thank you, but I'm actually going to listen to this other voice right now, as opposed to like, get away, meeting those desperate voices. I like the analogy of like a friend coming to the door and saying like, I'm a loser, like I'm a waste of time. And I wouldn't go, shut up.
Yeah.
I'd go, oh, that's so silly. Like, you're not a loser.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, just all of that work where we listen, where we become aware of our thinking and use the thinking that we know is going to benefit us. So yeah, showing up. Like, I mean, I know for myself, as much as there's this temptation to be like, I don't want to write today. Like, I know how it's going to feel at the end of the day when I don't. And I also know how it's going to feel if I do, and that, like, if anything, I've gotten like more congratulatory of myself when I do writing than less, even though it's been, like, sure, I've been doing it for ages, so I shouldn't really be impressed with myself. But not impressed. It's like
self-affirming of just like, hey, you did that. You showed up. You did the thing. Yeah. Every day.
Yeah. And I love, the comedian Maria Bamford. I don't know if you know.
No, I don't.
She says this thing of like, every time she does a task that like is difficult, she like by herself, she's like, yes, like, and I just love that idea, like actually celebrating, like, because it is, I mean, to this day, as much as it's still something that I resist. Like, I still have that resistance. So every day, I mean, maybe there's occasionally a day where I'm like, woohoo, I want to write, but mostly there's resistance.
Yeah.
And I think it's because it's such a mysterious and potentially like enlivening and heartbreaking thing to do. Like, when you fall short, it's so hard. It's so hard to take. But when you hit something, it's so glorious. And sometimes I just don't want to have to face looking down those barrels,
Yeah. It's such a confronting thing to do, because it's you confronting yourself, and if you don't deliver in some way, then it's, it can be a huge value judgment on yourself as a human. And
Totally.
Oh, it's so great. It's beautiful to hear you talk about all of this stuff and all these kind of wins you've had over the years, and all these different little strategies that are in place. And I think they're so important to continue, really. And that's sort of I suppose connected to the thing I was saying before about it feeling like it's a contribution, and having like really deep reasons to continue, because it would be so easy to just say, I'm just not going to do it anymore. Well, on the surface that seems like an option, but then after 4 days or 4 weeks or 4 months or whatever, it just comes like crawling back saying, no, this is something that's really important. It's who you are. You feel at your best when you're doing it. And even though it's a challenge, it's so rewarding as well. And I think maybe that's one, there's probably a few misperceptions in there, but I suppose your dad's a guitar player and guitar maker and knows about, has a context for music and the value of music or whatever. But when you encounter someone who's not a musician or a songwriter or an artist, and I don't know if there's people in your family or around you, and they're just like, oh, you're still writing songs? And they're very confused about what you do, or why you would do that. And they know you haven't, hit the jackpot yet. And they're like, you should have hit the jackpot when you were like 22. You're still going, what's happening there? And so, there's this deeper, I think about deeper purpose a lot, like, and, my identity as a songwriter or whatever. And those are the things that sort of, get me through those challenging times. Are there things that come to mind for you that even if you do fall into a lull or whatever, that sort of tends to rise up again and says, you need to continue for these reasons?
Yeah. And it tends to be the experience of songwriting itself, where there's nothing like it that seems to express something from within or something coming through me that nothing else that I do in life does, you know. And I've definitely had, you know, probably after every album or before the next album, you know, a period of like real soul searching around, you know, because, you know, by definition, I never hit the mark the way that I want to hit it, you know. Either with the songs themselves or with, you know, commercially with my career. You know, like nothing's ever perfect, you know, nothing's ever just so, you know, this whole soul searching, why am I doing this? What's the point? You know, like, should I keep going? Blah, 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 blah. And I don't think that that's confined to, you know, artists of minimal success like myself. Like, I think even probably very successful artists still have those questions. I mean, they could, because the answer can't be, oh, because I can make $1 million on my next record. Like, that's probably not a very satisfying answer, you know. But then, you know, if I'm down in that, like, despond for long enough, you know, I'll end up picking up the guitar and having the experience of like that connection that happens when something that I didn't even know I needed to say is expressed in the song. And I'll be like, oh, I have to do this. Like, I have to do this, even if I don't have an audience, you know. Or, you know, I'll have to just play it to my family and friends, like, if nothing else, because I have to do this. Yeah. That's kind of it. And you know, that notion that whatever that experience is for me as the writer, that it could translate into an experience that I've had as a listener when a line or the sound of someone's voice just like speaks something so profound to me. You know, like, I struggle with that a bit because I don't want to hope for that in case you know, there's like a push-pull of like wanting that to happen, but I can't expect that to happen, you know. So, but that, you know, that's certainly a big helpful pull towards songwriting.
And because I think there seems to be with, you know, with musicians and artists that I've talked to, that they get to a point, there's like this tipping point where they realize, or there's this internal acknowledgement, like, okay, this is the thing I'm doing, like, or like, I'm doing this, like, this thing's happening. I'm committing to this path. Do you remember the first time that happened, or a particular like pivotal point where your mind kind of shifted over into saying, I'm actually not really interested in doing anything else. If I do have to do something else, I know I'm there to get a paycheck, but this is really the path I'm on. Is there a moment? There's probably a number of moments that stack up, but.
No, I mean, sorry to repeat myself, but I think that same moment when I wrote a song that I actually liked, and felt like it expressed something that I wanted to express, and I felt like I could be proud to, like, you know, put it out into the world. I felt hooked, you know, and it was still I think a couple of years before I actually made my first record, but I was good or bad, and in some ways bad, I was just tunnel vision from that point.
Yeah, wow.
About being a songwriter and a recording, you know, person who records and releases and tours music.
Yeah.
And it's almost like, there was definitely some will happening, some force of will happening. And then looking back, I'm like, I still don't know how that worked out. You know, it's a bit of a mystery, like, you know, because there wasn't some, you know, massive breakthrough where I, you know, had a record deal and had a hit record or anything like that to make it to make it like real, you know, to make it to the grandparents and the people who say you're still songwriting, to make it like an actual legitimate exercise, you know, or endeavor. I've never really quite had that legitimacy in my, but although I've given it to myself, you know.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm still baffled as to how I'm still going in some ways.
Yeah. So if we can go back to that moment, and you may not have an answer for this, but it might be like the moment you reflect on it. So in that moment when you wrote that song and something switched over, what do you think was the experience that you had, or the acknowledgement that you made, or the piece of knowledge or wisdom that you discovered in that experience that because it's quite a radical shift when someone has a real shift of like, this is what I'm doing. Like, that's like a connection to your purpose, and people go their entire lives and never have that moment.
Right.
And so what do you feel happened in that moment? The acknowledgement, or I don't know.
Yeah, it is mysterious because, yeah, again, for good or bad, some people have those moments and some people seem to not. Mm-hmm. And part of it, which kind of just reiterates what I was just saying, but just more directly, like everything else just went away, you know, all other, like, what am I going to do with my life? You know, what am I going to study? Like all of that just disappeared. And, you know, I still to this day go like, what else could I do? You know, like what else would I do? Still got no answer for that. But it's just like this sort of vision took shape. And a like a powerful, like almost addiction to songwriting, or, you know, that it's not a good word, but like being hooked, words like that, to that process. And, you know, had I not been able to make a cent, you know, and been just, you know, dirt poor and in misery, like maybe I would have, you know, had to do something else. But I'd like to think, and this still could happen, you know, that if I ever need to make money from something else, that doesn't mean that I would stop songwriting. You know, that they're not mutually exclusive. If you know, like you can do your art and you can make money in other ways as well as from your art. And there's no shame in that. It's in fact, if anything, I've definitely contemplated how taking the pressure off music as the way to earn money is actually beneficial, you know, to the songwriting. And to the process and to the art and to like, and having a life. Like, that's why, for good or bad, as I was saying, I think the bad side of that tunnel vision was that I was, you know, in my 20s, I was just all about career and all about music. And I didn't build a life, you know, and, you know, in my 30s, I've built a life to which I can write songs about, you know, from which I can write about, you know, as opposed to, you know, only writing about or only having the experience of like being on the road, being about driving my career forward, which is what my 20s were all about.
Yeah, I can relate. Yeah. Cool. Awesome. Well, I feel like we're scratching the surface here. There's so much more to talk about. It's been really delightful to get to have a really deep conversation about songwriting. And
for me too. Thank you. Great questions, great thoughts.
Yeah.
The table.
Yeah. And so what's on the slate coming up? Some more songwriting, doing some songwriting today?
Yeah, I'm in a really good songwriting space at the moment. Yep. Written by myself today, and then also with my husband, Carl, and just, you know, the daily practice. I've got a bunch of songs on the go that I'm really excited about, and now like pretty much an album's worth, plus or minus, that I, over the next several months want to sort of start thinking about making into something. Yeah.
Awesome. Very exciting. Do you have one of these daily practice cards?
No, show me.
So this is my one, but I'll send it to you. We'll talk about daily practice.
Right.
I'm all about daily practice.
I love it. Absolutely.
Showing up.
10 minutes of something every day, and you get. Yeah. I'm trying to learn Spanish.
Ah, cool. Great. Yeah. Yeah. Mine's like morning routine. Exercise. Mm-hmm. And then I do like some mindset stuff to get myself in the right headspace. I do some journaling and plan my day. It's like, it probably sounds very familiar, but without it, I'm totally lost. I don't know if you find that. I'm just like,
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I don't think I have days anymore where I don't do at least one of those elements, whether it's meditation. Meditation is like the absolute like must do. And then journaling, like self-reflect, reflection work.
I've got celebrating on here as well.
Great.
Talked about like you have to acknowledge the progress. Like,
yes,
you did some stuff today. It wasn't a waste.
Yeah, and hence the card itself. I mean, I'm always amazed by if I review my day, how much I did compared to what I thought I did. Yeah. Like I always think I did less or didn't get as much done as the facts would, say.
Yeah.
So your card would be like, well, there's proof right there.
There's exactly. Yeah, it's good to have evidence. To say, like my, the stuff I'm trying to get done through the week or whatever. If I get to the end of the week and there's, boxes are ticked or whatever, I'm like, oh, cool. No, I did the things. Things are moving forward. Yeah, as humans, we love the feeling of progress. It's just, and if we don't have evidence of it, we're like, I didn't do anything.
Yep.
If the line's going up and to the right, we're all right, cool, things are good. All right. Awesome.
Cool. Well,
thanks for the conversation.
You're welcome.
So there you have it, the amazing Mijo Dyson. Hope you enjoyed that conversation. If you did, rate and like this video, share it with any other songwriters you think might enjoy this conversation, and always appreciate your support in subscribing, leaving a review, doing all of that cool stuff. Leave a comment below this video if you're watching this on my blog, and thanks for checking it out. If you want to get a taster of some of my own music, you can get a free download of a couple of tracks if you head to mijobiscan.com/free music. And I'll hook you up there. And thanks again for listening. All the best, and I'll talk to you soon.